Good morning, friends. Welcome to Sutta Study. We will be continuing this morning with the Bhikkhuni Samyutta. Hello to a few friends. Hello, Eleanor. Good to see you at every single session. It's wonderful. Hello, Jens, Geeta, and Michael. Welcome, friends. So on the live chat, there should be a link to the sutta that we will be reading from this morning. And it's Selā Sutta. All right, so without further ado, we can start by paying homage to the Buddha. And then we'll read the sutta all in one breath, and then we'll get back to it to sort of break it down. All right. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddham namam sangam namasami. Atsavati. Then in the morning the Bhikkhuni Selā dressed, and then she sat down at the foot of the tree for the day's abiding. Then Māra, the evil one, desiring to arouse fear, trepidation, and terror in the Bhikkhuni Selā, desiring to make her fall away from concentration, approached her and addressed her in verse. By whom has this puppet been created? Where is the maker of the puppet? Where has the puppet arisen? Where does the puppet cease? Then it occurred to the Bhikkhuni Selā, now who is this? This is Māra, the evil one, desiring to make me fall away from concentration. Then the Bhikkhuni Selā, having understood this is Māra, the evil one, replied to him in verses. This puppet is not made by itself, nor is this misery made by another. It has come to be dependent on a cause. With the cause's breakup, it will cease. As when a seed is sown in a field, it grows depending on a pair of factors. It requires both the soil's nutrients and a steady supply of moisture. Just so the aggregate and elements and these 6 bases of sensory contact have come to be dependent on a cause. With the cause's breakup, they will cease. Then Māra, the evil one, realizing the Bhikkhuni Selā knows me, sad and disappointed, disappeared right there. So we can close our eyes and contemplate these verses for a few moments. And we can open our eyes again and delight in these words of Dhamma. It's such incredible, beautiful poetry, really. That Bhikkhuni Selā is offering to us, and it's incredible how, with such few words, she's able to, communicate, to share the profound teachings of the Buddha. So, scrolling back up, we see once again our familiar scene with Māra going to tempt the bhikkhunis. So in this particular case, the Bhikkhuni Selā, but it's always the same scene. Māra coming to disturb the bhikkhunis as they are in meditation, and picking or looking for something that might disturb them, might interest them, might be a sort of gap in what they are, in their sort of commitment to the Dhamma. And we see that the question that Māra is asking is, whom has this puppet been created? Where is the maker of the puppet? Where has the puppet arisen? Where does the puppet cease? And so by puppet, It's a quite lovely word actually that is used because it gives some sort of sense of illusion in itself. And at the same time, a puppet is normally maneuvered by someone. Usually, there will be, the hands of a person maneuvering the puppet. So this points out to our general kind of experience of the world of not quite figuring out, not quite understanding when we're uninstructed, when we don't have the Dhamma. We have all these questions, and we feel like there is something that we can't really control. So clearly someone or something is maneuvering us. Clearly something or someone has created us. Where are we coming from? And these are all questions that actually the Buddha addresses in the Sabbasava Sutta, in the Majjhima Nikaya 2, the second sutta of the Majjhima Nikaya, where he describes, in the sutta, how to remove different types of taints. And in particular, related to this case, he talks about taints to be removed by seeing, so by seeing clearly. And it's fundamentally pointing to the fact that there are things that are fit for attention and things that are not fit for attention. And so I'll quote straight from that sutta. I have a little quote here for you that is the description of pretty much where our mind tends to veer naturally. And so the Buddha says, this is how the uninstructed worldling fundamentally attends unwisely. Was I in the past? Was I not in the past? What was I in the past? How was I in the past? Having been what? What did I become in the past? Shall I be in the future? Shall I not be in the future? What shall I be in the future? How shall I be in the future? Having been what? What shall I become in the future? Or else he is inwardly perplexed about the present thus. Am I? Am I not? What am I? How am I? Where has this being come from? Where will it go? So the beauty of these verses is that they are so relevant today as they were 2,500 years ago. They point to these sort of existential questions that each one of us has asked, ourselves. Sometimes it's the cause of depression, of deep depression, not finding really a meaning for this life or understanding who we are. But the Buddha says that actually all of this sort of way of thinking doesn't do anything useful to us. It just actually fuels suffering, fuels depression, fuels neurosis, and gets us more and more entangled with dukkha. And that's because it strengthens our identity view. It creates our sense of self, that there's all these questions come with assumptions that there is in fact a being, that there is a puppet that has been created. And since there is a puppet that has been created, there must be also a maker. And this puppet must have a beginning and there must have an end. So the Buddha says that fundamentally this kind of thinking points us into two fundamental ways of looking at the world. Either the idea, two extremes fundamentally, like either the idea that I exist or the idea that I don't exist. And he says that the entire world fundamentally turns around in between these two extremes. And if we analyze, for example, Western philosophy, it's pretty much veering all on whether we exist or we don't exist. So there is this kind of The Buddha is right. There are these like two polar extremes that create, all a series of identities in between them. So what the Buddha recommends instead for us to point our attention to is the following. So he says, the noble disciple attends wisely. This is suffering. Attends wisely. This is the origin of suffering. He attends wisely. This is the cessation of suffering. He attends wisely. This is the way leading to the cessation of suffering. In other words, pointing our mind towards the Four Noble Truths. So instead of creating further suffering, analyzing, looking, acknowledging first that there is suffering. Second, that there is a cause for this suffering. The third noble truth, that there is a way out of suffering. And the fourth noble truth is the way out of suffering. So actually following the path. And the Buddha says this is what is appropriate. This is how we remove taints, by seeing clearly. And we see that then Bhikkhuni Selā understands straight away that it's Māra talking to her, and then replies to Māra with the following words. This puppet is not made by itself, nor is this misery made by another. It has come to be dependent on a cause. With the cause's breakup, it will cease. Incredibly beautiful words. And we see once again, she's tackling this sort of these two views. So without beating around the bush, she beats the bush multiple times. So she's a bit Italian here, isn't she? I like to say that that's how we do. We're very direct in my culture. So we don't use too many words. We don't beat around the bush. We're quite direct. And so Bhikkhuni Selā is quite direct here, saying, there is pointing out to the eternalist versus annihilationist view. In other words, we, for example, in the Western culture, there is very much these days the idea that, YOLO, you only live once. And so we're born with this physical body, and then we die with this physical body, and that's it. So our sense of kind of everything else, our sense of awareness is born and seizes independence with this body. And in essence, actually, that is identifying the body as the soul, in other words. So in one shape or form, we're kind of, thinking that perhaps this is made by another. So maybe it's our parents, if we have that view, or maybe it's, a God creator of some sort, who knows? But fundamentally, there is this idea that this body is what makes who we are. And then the eternal standpoint instead is that there is a permanent self that jumps from body to body. And so this can be usually what we draw, what kind of often creates confusion in people, like the differences between the reincarnation in Hinduism and the concept of rebirth in Buddhism. And so here, fundamentally, when we're talking about reincarnation, there is the belief that there is something permanent, something that perhaps we call the soul, something that doesn't change, that is immutable, and just jumps once again from body to body. So that is not the Buddhist view. That is not the definition of rebirth. But rather the Buddhist view is that, as Venerable Selā says, it has come to be dependent on a cause. And with the cause's breakup, it will cease, which is very different from saying YOLO. It's fundamentally saying, explaining dependent origination. So the arising and falling of all conditions. In other words, actually, the words of the Buddha, whatever is of a nature to arise is of a nature to cease. And in the Nidana Samyutta, actually, the Buddha shares some beautiful words in terms of the body. So he says, monks, this body is not yours, nor does it belong to others. So very pertinent to these verses. They echo very much what Bhikkhuni Selā is saying. So this body is not yours, nor does it belong to others. It is old kamma, to be seen as generated and fashioned by volition, as something to be felt. Therein, because the instructed noble disciples attends carefully and closely to dependent origination itself thus. With ignorance as condition, volitional formations come to be. With volitional formations as condition, consciousness. With consciousness as condition, name and form. With name and form as condition, the six sense bases. With the six sense bases as condition, contact. With contact as condition, feeling. With feeling as condition, craving. With craving as condition, clinging. With clinging as condition, existence. With existence as condition, birth. With birth as condition, aging and death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, displeasure, and despair come to be. Such is the origin of the whole mass of suffering. This, because is called dependent origination. And we see that in the Sutta, Bhikkhuni Selā continues by saying, as when a seed is sown in a field, it grows depending on a pair of factors. It requires both the soil's nutrients and a steady supply of moisture. This is in such a beautiful, concise way of describing dependent origination in a way that really is beyond sort of words. It's an incredible visual where we see that the seed alone is not sufficient. We can have the best organic, certified seed, heirloom seed, incredible seed, yet in and of itself is not sufficient. Nor is, the good nutrients in the soil. We can have the best soil in the world, but in and of itself, it won't grow a plant. Or similarly, the moisture. We can have as much rainfall as we want, but if we don't have a good soil, we don't have a seed, nothing will grow. So all of these conditions together are necessary to get a plant to grow. And that's why often you'll hear, the term interdependence in English used to describe dependent origination. Because especially with the Western way of approaching things, we tend to have a linear idea, linear view of causality. So it starts here and it ends here. There's always a cause to one thing. So it just goes like this. But rather, the Buddhist view, it's a little different. It's more kind of like connecting the dots. So interdependence. So it's not a straight cause and effect, cause and effect, cause and effect. I mean, there's that too, but there are multiple causes and conditions for each effect. And so the simile of the seed grown in a field that needs both the soil and both the simile of the plant growing in a field that needs both a seed, soil, and moisture in order to come into being is extremely appropriate to describe interdependence. And we see that Bhikkhuni Selā continues by saying, just so the aggregates and elements and these 6 spaces of sensory contact have come to be dependent on a cause, with the cause's breakup, they will cease. So Bhikkhuni Selā, in case you hadn't grasped it so far, is clearly an enlightened being. She's a Bhikkhuni Arahat. And it's obvious because she sees dependent origination. She sees the Dhamma. As the Buddha said, one who sees dependent origination sees the Dhamma, and one who sees the Dhamma sees dependent origination. And so she's able to understand how all the other sort of teachings of the Buddha fit in neatly within this law, the law of dependent arising. And yesterday, when we were discussing the sutta of Bhikkhuni Sisupachala, we were talking a lot about views, beliefs versus a more kind of scientific approach. And actually, that's very pertinent once again when we talk about dependent origination, because it is a law that needs to be understood, that affects our experience of the world. It affects every single element that is, the Dhamma. The Dhamma is dependent origination. And whether we like it or not, whether we believe in it or not, it affects. It's no different than the law of gravity. And, it exists whether or not a Buddha, Sammasambuddha, like Shakyamuni Buddha, is alive or not, or if his teachings are alive or not. No different than, all the laws of physics, that whether or not, I don't know how you say it in English, Galilee maybe, is alive or not, it still affects the world. Or similar to Einstein, same thing. He's not alive anymore, but anything he's discovered still is valid, still is affecting the world. And so she says, just so the aggregates and elements, and obviously we all know, hopefully, that the aggregates are form, feeling, perception, volitional formations, and consciousness. It's important to remember that actually Buddha Vipassya attained awakening by contemplating the rise and fall of the aggregates. And then Bhikkhuni Selā also mentions the elements. And so the elements, my understanding is that they can be taken both as, for example, the 6 elements, so earth, water, fire, air, space, and consciousness, which are basically our ways through which we experience the world as sentient beings. Or in the Dhatu Samyutta, the Buddha explains the elements as the eye element, the ear element, the nose element, the tongue element, the body element, the mind element. So the diversity of the elements and of their respective, some respective elements. So the form, in the case of the eye, form and eye consciousness. In the case of the ear, sounds and ear consciousness. And in the case of the nose, the odor element and the nose consciousness element. And in the case of the tongue, the taste and the tongue consciousness. And in the case of the body, the felt objects and sort of the body consciousness element. And then in the case of the mind, finally, we have mental phenomena and mind consciousness elements. And he says in that sutta, I have a little quote for you. How is it because that in dependence on the diversity of elements, there arises the diversity of contacts? In dependence on the eye element, there arises eye contact. In dependence on the ear element, there arises ear contact. In dependence on the nose element, there arises nose contact, and so far and so forth. So fundamentally, it is in dependence on the diversity of elements that there arises the diversity of contacts. And this is what the Buddha tells us. So fundamentally, what Bhikkhuni Selā is doing, is sharing, is making long story short. So she's saying everything has come to be dependent on a cause. And once we eliminate the cause, they will cease. So once again, with the appearance of this appears, and with the cessation of this ceases, which is in essence the law of dependent origination. And once she has eloquently described this process and shared these teachings, Māra understands that the bhikkhuni is fully enlightened and that there is no crack in her mind, no way to get her, to remove her from concentration. And so, sad and disappointed, Māra disappears right there. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. All right, so this is what Bhikkhuni Selā has shared with us. And if you have any thoughts or ideas or questions, you're welcome to type them in the live chat. And I see that we have some few friends that have joined us in the meanwhile. Hi, Jen. Hi, Priyakant and Poonam. Good to see you all, friends. I see no comments yet. Perhaps you're experiencing a lot of Dhammasukha. I definitely am. This sutta is incredibly beautiful and so powerful in the description of the Buddhist teachings, as I was mentioning. So if there are no thoughts and no questions, but you want to save some for this evening, that's also good. So this evening we're going to have monk chat all with me, because all my other venerable friends are all on retreat. So we're having a retreat here at the Cloud Monastery, and I'm the one assigned to take care of the live streams. So this is what actually will be happening from January, from the beginning of January to February. Every week you'll have one monastic sharing the Dhamma here online, as we will be practicing seclusion and meditation for the entire 2 months. We will finally go on our winter retreat. So we're practicing now. We're doing a soft fall retreat leading to the winter. All right, and Michael has a question. Let me ask possibly about Kamma. There are in the Abhidhamma many details about Kamma. How important are the details in our practice? So I am possibly the worst person to ask about Abhidhamma, because I don't have a natural inclination towards the teachings of the Abhidhamma. They actually confuse me more than they explain or clarify things for me. So other practitioners, other lineages have more of a sort of inclination. Here at the Cloud Monastery, nobody is very much into the Abhidhamma, so it's not really a matter of discussion most of the time. So my personal approach in terms of the details about Kamma I wouldn't say that the details of really analyzing, as you said, actually getting caught up in technicalities, I feel like it becomes too much of an abstract understanding of karma. And a lot of times then we start playing word games with the Dhamma instead of actually practicing the Dhamma. So in reality, all of these things nobody can really explain. Words are not sufficient to describe the Dhamma. So the Dhamma simply is, and words help us to point us in the right direction. So it's up to ourselves to do the work, to really put the effort of realizing and understanding the teachings for ourselves, which is why I feel like the Buddha in the suttas has used very broad brush strokes so that we don't get too obsessed with the details. So getting back to your question about karma, I think it's important to understand it in terms of causality and intention. So have a general understanding of karma and see how causality affects your life. Taking it as a working hypothesis, perhaps if you don't have quote unquote a belief in karma, take it as a working hypothesis for a year and really shift your life, practicing as if it were quote unquote real. And you will start seeing that actually everything makes much more sense by taking karma. But you don't have to understand, you don't have to study every single mind moment or whatever different types of karma that exist in order to have that experiential understanding. So those are my thoughts, but you're welcome to ask other monastics, and I'm sure they will all have different answers based on what works for them. So that's also something else to keep in mind, the fact that we're all dealing with different conditions, and based on those conditions, certain teachings will help us, will guide us, will be more helpful than others. So I find the suttas of the Pali Canon to be extremely helpful for me, but some other people actually find the commentaries to be extremely helpful for them, and some others find just following the Vinaya as monastics to be incredibly helpful without necessarily even learning too much Dhamma. And some people find the Abhidhamma to be incredibly helpful. So who am I to say that all of the other people are wrong? I'm just saying it's different way, different approach. So see what works, and if you see that unwholesome mind states are diminishing and wholesome mind states are increasing, then you know for yourself that you're going in the right direction. All right, so I think that's all for this morning. So we will be meeting again this evening at 7:30 p.m. New York City time. So if you have any questions, please bring them this evening, and we'll have a little monk chat with Bhikkhuni Soma. And Gita says, I hope you're feeling better with each passing day. We're praying for your good health and longevity. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. You're very kind. Yes, well, it's working because I'm feeling much better. So very much appreciated. All right, so we can end with 3 sadhus. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. See you all this evening.